Is it time for Africa to have a permanent seat at the UN Security Council? That's the question several African leaders have been asking for decades. And as the 77th UN General Assembly has got into full swing here in New York, the calls for African representation are getting louder. Senegal's President Macky Sall, who is also chairman of the African Union, was the first African leader to address this hall. He said right here that it's time for a fairer and more inclusive model of global governance that's better suited to the realities of our time. In his speech, Mr. Sall referred to the Eswatini Consensus. This is a position that was agreed by the African Union back in 2005 in the valley of Eswatini in Eswatini. It demands at least 2 permanent African seats in the UN Security Council and 5 non-permanent seats. But it's not just African leaders who are calling for changes. Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida recently said his country would push for an African seat at the body in order to, quote, address the historical injustice against Africa. And during his address to this UN General Assembly, US President Joe Biden said he supports permanent seats in the Security Council for countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean.
The United States supports increasing the number of both permanent and non-permanent representatives of the Council.
But if Africa does get representation in the Security Council, which countries would hold a seat? And how would those countries be chosen? Well, the African Union says it should be the one responsible for selecting Africa's representatives and determining the criteria for selection. So, what does the future hold for Security Council reform? Well, negotiations have been going on for decades with no real meaningful change. But with influential permanent members such as the US calling for an expanded Security Council, reform could now be higher on the UN's agenda.